Welcome, everybody. It's our final session here of the three-part series on getting your data prepared and moved into a PDM. So I'm Phil Steiger. I oversee the data management team here at KETIV, and with me today is Jason Cordamach, who is our architect, and we have Jose Perez Clara. As I always mess up, but that's okay. He is one of our vault engineers, and we'll be covering today's topics. So we're going to start off today with some poll questions. The first one is, where are you in your PDM journey? Second one is, what is your next steps? And the third one is, do you have a training and onboarding manual for new employees around your engineering processes? Give you guys all a few minutes to answer.
Yeah, it gives us an opportunity to just kind of get a sense of who's on and where you are in your journey in terms of, are you using a PDM solution? Do you have goals? And if so, in terms of connecting PDM to other business applications, and I'm just curious to see where people are in their transition to getting the most out of their data in their system.
Yeah, so since it's the third part here of our three-part series, we're gonna try to wrap everything together and figure out how to move forward in the process of PDM. So but once you're in PDM, again, where are we going to go afterwards, right? We want to make sure that we have a clear path moving forward from PDM, because data doesn't just go in there and stop, but there's usually additional steps that we go through, and people that we share it with, people that need to access it. So it's always a good idea to think of how to move forward from there.
So can we get the answers to the poll questions? See where we're at. 3, no PDM, just PDM, 1 that has other connections. 3
Good.
for ERP, 4 to PLM, 1 to CRM, 2 to others. Yeah. 70% on the whole manual and process that don't have a current in there.
And I really like what we're saying in terms of like next steps. Everyone, there seems to be a nice cross section in terms of, ERP, PLM, CRM, or other. And that's the interesting thing about PDM. At least I think interesting is the adaptability in terms of, you don't have to connect it to everything, but you can really kind of tailor it to what it is that you need in your business process. Because that's the fun part about our job, is getting to see how everyone uses these tools and how they get in, or what they get linked to, their workflows and things like that. So it's exciting to have a big group of people here with different variety with different interests.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it a little bit or mention it down the line, but there's different ways you can go, but there's going to be certain things that are going to be key decisions early on in the process that we're going to have to talk about. So it's good to know that it's going to go in different directions for a lot of people on the call.
So today's an overview of what we're going to talk about today: data loading. What are my options? Because there is a lot of options to getting your data into a PLM assessment. The devil's in the details. Trust me, it is critical. And then configuration, it's okay to start small. You don't have to eat the whole apple all at once. Training, I think, is very necessary for success. Especially if you're having to report up, talk about ROI, because you just spent a lot of money purchasing this solution. Upper management wants to see an ROI, and they want to see it quickly. And one of the ways you're going to see that quickly is training. So let's start out. Data loading. What are my options? Well, there's several tools and options to get your data from off of the server into a PDM. I'm going to use Vault as an example since that's what we support mainly. So in a Vault environment, you have autoloader. You can do task scheduler. There's a tool called the DTU tool, but that has to be, it can only be used by
Trained resellers.
yeah. And then there's the check-in manually. Now they all have the pros and cons to them.
Absolutely.
And when you think about loading your data, you should think about putting all of your data in there, because you just went out and spent this money on a PDM solution. You don't want to go, oh, we're just going to put new data in there. Well, now you have data in 2 locations. Maybe Jason and Jose can talk more around autoloader, task scheduler, some of the pros and cons to that, compared to like the DTU tool, where that's something we can do.
Yeah, so it really comes back to the kind of data and then how much data you want to load. You know, autoloader is great in terms of an automated process, in terms of, you know, if you have all your information in one location and, you know, all the links are there and everything's fine, autoloader works great. You know, I guess the downside to autoloader is that, you know, and in any PDM system, like if you have broken links, you can't check the file in until you fix the link. So, you know, if the data isn't as clean because things have been moved or moved around, that's where other tools like manually check it in, where you can resolve the links as you go, or, you know, outsource it to a reseller to use like the GTU tool, where we can massage large data sets and get it in. The task scheduler, or the inventor task scheduler, is, you know, another tool very similar to the autoloader in terms of allowing you to bulk process things in. It goes back to, you know, really understanding your data, coming up with a plan, knowing what you're going to start with, you know, because loading in legacy data versus, you know, active projects, you know, it's very easy to get someone to load in legacy data, but, you know, it's also good to also think about a plan of how do you move projects that are midway so that you're not disrupting business, and making sure you get it all in there in the latest versions. And the other thing you have to think about is when you're loading in legacy data is making sure that you get it all. And then, you know, how do you preserve the revision information? And every company manages the revisions different ways outside of a PDM system, whether it's metadata, whether it's on the drawing or not at all, or in the file name. And so we'll get to talking about a little more of that in the details in a minute. But it's these little things that we have to think about when we're trying to decide when and how to move the data. And it goes back to, once the data is in there, making sure that the right people still have access to it.
Yeah, kind of picking a source of truth, right? At that time, that's one of the things that during discussions for this KVA series we talked about, as far as, you know, one of the things we want to avoid is having data in 2 locations. So making sure that whatever data you're loading, the correct people have access to it and that they know it's there. So one of the things that Jason brought up is projects that are ongoing. So, you know, if you decide to move that data into Vault, but only half of the team or half of the people that access it know it, now that now you have the issue, or you might have the issue where somebody's going to the old location, somebody's going to the new location, and you don't have a source of truth, one true source of truth at that point. And then just to touch on another point that Jason made is, you know, well, if you've been following along with the series, then, you know, you may have worked on cleaning up your data. You may have worked on getting it organized for the autoloader, but overall, the people that will know your data, that will know what's important to you, as far as CAD data goes, is you. So typically we can work with you, make sure that you know, we understand what's important to you, maybe help you with it, but ultimately you will have to make the decision as to where you want things to be stored and how you want them to be uploaded.
And I'll add one last thing. If you have a large amount of data, sometimes it's just better to pay somebody else to load that data like us. Because we have specialty tools, we do it a lot. And, you know, when you start running the numbers, if you have a couple 100,000 files and you're trying to load all of them, you say, well, I'll just hire somebody. Well, it might take them several months to get all those files in there versus us doing it in a couple of weeks using like the DTU tool and stuff like that, which is a great tool.
Yeah, and also keep in mind, right, like in that time that it takes to load files by your you know, on your own, and again, the one true source of data in your environment, but then also if you have half of it here, half of it there, the engineers all spend time trying to figure out, well, where should I be getting this from, going to either system and trying to find it. So you kind of make things a little less efficient during that transition period.
So once you have decided on how you're going to get your data in there, probably the biggest thing is the assessment. And the reason I say the devil's in the details is because this is where you really got to make those critical decisions of how your vault or your PDM is set up, because you want to make sure you're looking maybe 3 years down the road, because right now maybe you're just thinking of using a PDM, but that's why we ask in the poll question, ERP, PLM, some other application. Well, that'll determine how you should configure your PDM in the beginning, the workflows, the release processes, revision schemes. And the big one is the file or item-based lifecycles. So these are real critical things that you need to think about when you're doing the configuration or doing the assessment on your PDM and how you're going to set it up. I know that Jason and Jose can talk for hours on this stuff.
Yeah, because the biggest challenge is, some of these settings are very easy to change in the beginning, but once you load a bunch of data, all the settings can be changed, but it takes a lot more effort. Like let's just take, for instance, switching from a file base to an item based lifecycle like that. Getting a file to an item-based lifecycle is easy. Removing or turning off file-based lifecycles and getting that kind of historical data into the item, that is very tedious work that could be avoided by just starting with items in the beginning. And so it's those kind of little things to think about. Devil's definitely in the details. Like something as simple as deciding to add some more metadata later. It's very easy to add a new property and make the mapping, and all new files, it's very easy, but to go back and add that property, to go back and make sure that file has it, or push the metadata to the file, or extract it, those kinds of tasks can be very tedious and require either a lot of manual work for one person, or something that has to be outsourced and scripted or use specialty tools. And so, the reason why we're having this discussion is to bring awareness that, we spend a lot of time in assessment when we're setting up PDM systems, because, having the experience of having to undo or change some of these settings, and I'm sure you guys have experienced some of this as well, especially when you start a new company and they've been using PDM system for 5, 10, 15 years, and you're like, oh, I wish they would have, turned on and forced unique file names. Like there's certain features. And so we try to help and make sure that things get set up the right way, and that we're making these decisions in a conscious way, so that, we're not creating bigger problems down the road. Because what we see is that a small decision early on can really snowball into a much bigger issue when it comes time to try to clean the data or reorganize things.
Yeah, it's not something you want to realize 1.5 terabytes later and have to change a bunch of things. We've actually had some customers who, come into a new company and they see the setup and they're like, well, I wasn't sure what the decision process was before this, but this is where we are. And, they want to make some changes. And I think we've had a couple that are like, all right, we're gonna start over, like brand new vault, brand new environment. We're gonna go from scratch. Any information that we have in our current PDM system, we're gonna go ahead and sort through it, pick what we need, kind of go through this process that we've been talking about, and kind of doing it right. I mentioned it at the beginning of the session today, but there's certain things that are key decisions that should be discussed and weighed on, file versus items. Um, if you start rolling out file life cycles, you have categories, you have properties and all such that are applying to these files. And if you want to switch to items, then you have to kind of go back and undo a lot of that, make sure that the life cycles aren't conflicting with each other as you switch over. So, it's very important we set up sessions a couple hours at a time, or I do a couple hours at a time, with the necessary parties, to see who's included in the workflow, what your current process is, get a lot of pretty much all the information we can out of how you handle your CAD data, and what makes it good and usable CAD data, to make sure that we're capturing all of that in Vault or in PDM, I guess. It also, what I've noticed is with some of our larger customers, it gives them the ability and the chance to talk about the process. It's happened many a time where, well, we do it this way, they do it that way. What's the way that we want to do it as a whole, and kind of come to a consensus. And Vault kind of gives us the ability to enforce that and make sure that everyone's playing with the same set of rules pretty much at that time.
Yeah, that's such a great point, especially like if one department sets up Vault and another department gets Vault, and then they want to merge them together, and one's using file-based item or file-based lifecycle, the other one's using item-based lifecycle. Like there's the beauty is that PDM systems can be configured in a lot of different ways, and I've seen a wide spectrum of processes, but yet that's what makes it so useful, because it can match your business need, but it's hard, especially when you're a new person coming into a new company. It's like, why are we doing it this way? There might be better ways. But at the very least, it's good to document those kind of decisions.
Well, and if you have multiple business units, one of the things I suggest when you're setting it up is you get somebody from each business unit to be involved in the process. So you guys standardize a lot of this across the board. So if somewhere down the line they want to merge the two businesses together, you don't run into one has file-based, the other one has item-based, which could make it more difficult to merge stuff. And then one thing I left off is file names on this. You don't want to go back and change file names 3 years into the process. You want to make sure, and we've talked about that in the past. You really want to make sure your file names are what you want them going forward. So the next big thing, now that you've done the assessment, it's time to configure it. And I put it's okay to start small. And the reason I put that is I see a lot of times companies get all excited. We're going to a PDM. Let's deploy everything. I want to do everything under the sun. You're not going to have that success. People are creatures of habit. They don't like change. Change is difficult for them. So if you're going from, hey, my files are on a server, to a PDM, start out small. Get your items, your basic configuration, so they can start to get used to just the check-in, check-out process of how to use a PDM system. Because if you start introducing some of these other things into the process, you're just going to have your ROI, your adoption is going to be a lot slower. And so I always say it's that one bite at a time on the apple. So you can have a goal to set up a lot of these things, but say, hey, we're going to get everybody on board. We're going to have them use it for a couple of months, get their feet wet, get comfortable, and then start introducing other stuff into the process. But if you try to do it all at once, it's going to be complete failure.
Yeah, name of the game is adoption, right? So we want to increase the percentage of successful adoption. And if you're throwing a new tool with a whole set of requirements to release things and whole new picks and clicks, just introducing a new tool by itself, it's more, a lot of the times users will see it as more work. So kind of rolling out the tool, explaining the basic functionalities of it, basic training on a tool, getting them up to speed, getting them used to it, and then introducing workflow and releasing, I feel has a better chance of being adopted and liked.
And for instance, like change orders, if we think about the journey, getting files in Vault or into PDM, getting them initially released, and then maybe that might be a good time once everyone's comfortable to come back and add a change order process so that you're documenting when so you have a formal change process going from, the first rev to the second, instead of trying to do it all at once in terms of, now you're making change orders just to say that it's an initial rev. And that's a lot more information for the end users to manage. And so sometimes it's good to kind of wait on some of those features once you got the adoption, once you've got the data in the PDM, you have, your current projects or legacy projects released. And then at that point, once everyone's kind of comfortable, come back and either add, change orders or start looking at automating, the creation of release PDFs or, coming back and doing more training around some of the more advanced features and items in terms of like bond management and stuff like that.
And for anybody who's an IT person on the phone or on this, I always look at it, it's easier to do annual upgrades of software, so there's less training involved. So I also look at it that way. For stuff like this, you do little incremental things is a lot easier than big changes, because big changes people just don't adopt very well, at least in my experience dealing with software.
Absolutely. Well, especially like even, it's easy to say, custom part library, but that has tremendous cascading effects on either your current ERP system or how you're currently managing libraries. It could also affect data loading in terms of cleaning up models so they're all referencing, the correct library parts. It's also a great opportunity to think about what is the workflow in terms of requesting a model, getting it the correct part number, getting the right metadata in terms of vendor and vendor part number. And do you want that information in the PDM system, or do you want that information to live in the ERP system? So there's, pros and cons to both, but it's these kinds of things that take some time, and especially when it starts to involve other departments and getting their input and really designing and configuring a PDM system that works for everyone.
And you also have to look at it when you talk, the new buzzword is digital transformation. This is the start of digital transformation, is getting your stuff into a PDM solution configured correctly, so that now you have the ability then to have it shared out to manufacturing or to your ERP system or PLM or a CRM. So you start having less human interaction, some of it being a little bit more automated, so you don't have that human mistake when you're taking a bomb and somebody's now manually typing it into your ERP system for you. How many times do they accidentally fat finger that bomb into the ERP system? Your goal is to get it into your PDM system correctly so that it can be pushed into your ERP system automatically, which saves time, speeds up the process. So I think the last thing is training. It's necessary for success. I think it's overlooked a lot of times, or it's done just, they give a little bit of guidance and then they let the employee go. But I think the more training that you give an employee, the more successful they're going to be with the application. And we started looking at doing training plus mentoring when we deliver solutions now, because a lot of the times just doing a training class and saying, okay, your system is set up, it doesn't give the end user enough time to go use it for a month, and then they're going to have a lot of questions. So we're doing a mix now where we do training and then we come back and we have short meetings with the end users, because they're going to have questions on how to use the tool. They've been using it in the real world environment for a while. So we do a lot more mentoring now, which we're finding to be more successful. It's a new process for an employee, and I didn't finish this.
Well, and when you're designing a workflow, and it might make a lot of sense, but after you start using it for a couple of weeks, it's not uncommon to need to tweak it, because either you don't need it, or there's ways to improve the process, or you forgot a step, or want to give a purchasing to be able to view it when it's in the review state so that they can sign off on it before it's released. Like there's you don't know what you don't know, and we're finding that kind of adoption time, it makes it a lot easier to kind of really tune it and get a system that's tailored to the business needs.
Well, and from a business side, companies are really looking at ROI. When they spend money, they want a return on their investment, and they want it quicker and quicker. I mean, we live in a society of instant gratification. Businesses are the same way. They want, if they're going to fork out a lot of money, they want to see a return on their investment. So you've put in this beautiful system, you got it all set up. Well, unless you train the people and you help them be successful, the tool isn't any good. They do need training. And you guys see it all the time.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, one of the other successful things to think about is, how are you going to train the next person? How do you, make sure everyone's doing it the same way? And we're finding more and more that the people we work with are keeping and making and maintaining their own procedural manuals, because it, especially when you start adding like a change process, more advanced workflows and stuff like that, it's helpful for the onboarding process to be able to, view the recording, but also to have something to refer back to, something easy, as simple as explaining, SPART numbering or numbering information, or the organizational logic. It's stuff that we start to take for granted, and sometimes training a new employee gives you a really good perspective of what can be improved.
Oh, and how long is it taking you to onboard that employee? To get them up to speed to be productive.
Yeah, and it kind of touches on something else that we talked about as far as CAD managers and why they're necessary, right? Because you can have these documents in place, you can have these training procedures, but if nobody's making sure that they're being followed and that there's a schedule met for those, then it kind of falls flat at that point.
Yeah, that's a great point. You can't stress how important it is to have a CAD manager and really be a champion for PDM and for the connection of PDM to other tools.
And if you guys haven't seen that, we do have a KVA on, about CAD managers and how important that is for the business. So we've come to the point where questions and answers. Anybody have any questions that we might be able to address?
yeah, feel free to go into Zoom and click on the Q&A or chat and put any questions that come on mind.
Also, this is the last part of our 3-part session, right? But if there's something you feel like we didn't cover or you want to know more about, Christina mentioned the survey at the end of the session. Let us know. It helps us out a bunch actually, in making sure that we cover everything that we need. But if there's topics down the line where we do KVAs, it helps us figure out what to do at the same time.
And just to let you know, our next KVA is going to be another Ask the Experts, where all of us will be on. And it'll be more of an open forum to ask questions around PDM and stuff like that. I think that'll be in mid-February, mid to late February, just to let you know, to look out for that one. We had one last year and it seemed to be very, it was a good session, a lot of good questions. I don't see any questions coming in, so we'll give you some time back today. I want to thank everybody. Jose, Jason, I'd like to thank you. Christina, thank you for hosting. Hope everybody has a great afternoon, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.